When I was 28, my father assisted me in purchasing my first house. While I was never spoiled, my father had ample financial resources and lent me a considerable amount of money when I expressed my interest in buying a home. The previous owners of the house were an elderly couple. The husband had passed away several years prior to my move-in date, while the wife had recently passed away just a few weeks before I made the purchase. Fortunately, the couple's son agreed to leave a significant amount of the furniture in the house, which made my transition into the new space much easier. He only took what he needed or wanted, so I didn't have to buy as much furniture. However, I did decide to get rid of some of the outdated items, including an old rocking chair in the living room that didn't fit with the house's aesthetic. The day after moving in, I spent most of the day cleaning out the upstairs section of the house. It was hard work, so I took breaks when needed, but it consumed most of my day. Unfortunately, I had a mild form of insomnia, which kept me awake the night before, so I was already exhausted. As a result, I didn't have any energy to cook dinner, and I opted to go out for Chinese food instead. However, when I returned home, I was distressed to discover that the front door was unlocked. I couldn't recall if I had forgotten to lock it or not. I hoped that I had merely forgotten, but it seemed unlikely given that it was a brand new home, and I was particularly cautious about security. To feel safer, I turned on every light on the main floor, and then proceeded to do the same on the upper level of the house. I illuminated the common area and all 3 bedrooms. Although I had only been in the basement once before, I felt compelled to check it too. It wasn't a large basement, merely a storage space that also housed the washer and dryer. While I was more confident that I had merely forgotten to lock the door, I still needed to check the basement to confirm my suspicion. As I opened the basement door and flicked on the light, I spotted an old rocking chair sitting in the middle of the basement. I didn't recall seeing it the first time I was there, and I could swear that it was the same one that I had discarded the previous night. Though I didn't see anyone down there, I felt uneasy. As I went back upstairs to eat my Chinese food, I left the basement door slightly ajar, which was adjacent to the kitchen. I began to hear creaking sounds coming from downstairs, and I panicked, rushing to the basement door. When I tried to turn on the light, it wouldn't work, and I was left wondering what was making those eerie sounds. I walked to the kitchen, retrieved my flashlight from under the sink, and shone it down the stairs. I saw the rocking chair moving, and someone was sitting in it. It was an elderly woman with gray curly hair, glasses, and dressed in a pink nightgown. Her head slowly turned to look at me, and I gasped and fled, closing the door behind me. I didn't know what to think at that moment, but I knew I had to call the police. When they arrived, we searched the basement together, but we didn't find anyone. The cops began to look at me as if I were crazy, and eventually they left. I contacted the son of the previous owners of the house, and he came over within the hour. We went down to the basement together, and he was visibly shaken. After some emotional conversation, he left with the rocking chair. Although it was emotional for him, it was the scariest thing I had ever witnessed. From then on, I kept the basement door locked 24/7 and was scared to do laundry for months. However, after half a year of nothing happening, it wasn't as bad. I lived in the house for only a year and a half. When I was 12 years old, my family relocated to a new residence situated in the Louisiana countryside near a small village. Having grown up in rural areas, I was not accustomed to city life or anything remotely similar to it. The property we moved into was 3 acres and afforded us a great deal of privacy. On the second night in the house, our dog, Parker, who slept in my room, began to bark and growl in the middle of the night. When I sat up in bed, he wagged his tail but continued to bark and growl in the direction of the corner of the room. I couldn't discern what had caught his attention, and even after checking the closet, I found nothing. I instructed Parker to be quiet, which he did, but I could still hear him periodically lifting his head and reacting to something. The next day, an elderly man named Gene knocked on our front door while my dad was answering it. I overheard the exchange from the living room, and Gene introduced himself as our next-door neighbor. My dad asked me to come over and say hello, which I did. Gene struck me as a little odd and aloof, even at my young age, but he seemed pleasant enough. The following day, I was playing Pokemon on my Game Boy in the backyard, and my dad was out front mowing the lawn. No one else was at home at the time. Suddenly, Gene appeared in our backyard, wearing farmer's overalls and a hat. He struck up a conversation with me in his thick southern accent, asking what I was up to. Although there was no fence dividing the front and backyards, I felt uneasy about his sudden appearance and intrusion. I told him I was playing Pokemon, and he immediately recognized the game, making Pikachu noises in an attempt to be amusing. However, his behavior only served to make me feel uneasy. As time passed, I began to sense that there was something peculiar about Gene. One day, as I was playing in the backyard, my dad appeared with a lawnmower. When he saw Gene sitting next to me, he turned off the mower and approached us with a smile. Despite my dad's attempt to remain cordial, I could detect a note of confusion in his expression and tone. Although he never asked Gene directly, I knew that he was wondering why he was in our backyard. My dad told me to go inside and wash the dishes, which I understood as a signal to distance myself from Gene. A few minutes later, my dad came in and asked me if Gene had walked into our yard. I confirmed that he had, and my dad then instructed me to stay away from him and to let him know if I ever saw him again. Several nights later, I was awoken by Parker's barking and growling. This time, he was looking out the window. I got up to check if anything was happening outside, but found nothing. Suddenly, I heard Gene's creepy old man's voice and his imitation of Pikachu noises. I immediately ran out of my room, screaming for my dad. When I informed him that Gene was outside my window, he hurried outside to investigate. However, he was unable to locate Gene on our property. My dad then went to the house next door, where Gene was supposed to be residing, but an older woman answered the door and had no knowledge of him. We visited every neighboring house, but nobody had ever heard of Gene. After failing to locate Gene, my dad called the police to report the man's presence. The police promised to keep an eye out for him, and the incident even made the news. However, we never encountered Gene again or learned his true identity. 2 years ago, I purchased my first house, which I still currently reside in. During the initial unpacking and settling in phase, I was living alone and single. Despite this, I believed it was the right time for me to invest in a house. A few friends came over to assist me with unloading the truck full of boxes, and I compensated them with food as they refused payment. After completing the task, they stayed for a while to hang out. While one of my friends, Dale, was in the bathroom, he heard strange noises coming from inside the walls. He mentioned it to me before leaving with the others later that day. Since it was a Saturday, I stayed up late on my laptop watching Netflix. However, I heard some peculiar thumping sounds from above me, which was strange since my bedroom was upstairs, and the only thing above me would be the attic. Then, I recalled Dale's comment about the noises from inside the walls. I approached the attic door and hesitated before opening it. I climbed the stairs to the attic and switched on the dim yellow light. The noises from inside the wall ceased, or perhaps they weren't originating from the attic. The attic was an enormous empty space with no boxes, and it was evident that no one was up there. I noticed a couple of massive framed paintings leaning against the wall, but nothing else. After attempting to get some sleep, I heard the strange noises again, which made me believe that a small animal, such as a raccoon, was present inside the walls. The noise was coming from directly above my room, so I assumed it had to be in the attic. I returned to the attic to investigate, searching for the section directly above my bedroom. However, I realized that the attic did not extend the entire length of the house, and a wall was covering the area above my room. I moved closer to the wall to listen for potential noises, and heard noises emanating from the other side. While examining the two paintings leaning against the wall, I noticed they were slightly angled. As I began to adjust one of the paintings, my heart started racing when I realized it revealed a sizable hole in the wall. Holding the painting upright, I was suddenly jolted when it was knocked out of my hands, causing me to almost have a heart attack. A sickly-looking girl emerged from the hole, appearing to be high on drugs. She was shaking, making weird noises and creepy laughter, and grabbed onto me, digging her nails into my shoulders. I screamed and pushed her off me as hard as possible. She fell backward into the secret room, and I bolted towards the exit, slamming the attic door shut behind me. I quickly locked myself in my room and dialed the police, reporting that a dangerous and unstable person was in my attic. Within 5 minutes, 3 cop cars arrived, and a total of 5 police officers entered my house. I could hear the struggle from my room as the officers headed into the attic. The girl screamed like a wild animal, and it sounded like she was trying to attack the officers, resulting in them having to tase her. After a considerable struggle, they managed to handcuff her and carry her outside to one of the cars. Despite her being anywhere from 25 to 35 years old, she appeared sickly and frail. While the officers were still inside, I cautiously entered the attic to investigate the secret room. Inside, I found a pile of blankets, a dirty pillow, a plethora of food wrappers, and human waste in one corner. It was evident that this girl had been living in the secret room for quite some time. Discovering this on my first night in my new home was truly a nightmare. The girl was taken to a nearby psychiatric center to receive the help she needed. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and sharing it to support me. The best is yet to come.